Well, first I want to tell you a story about a garage door opener that I found in the middle of the road one time. This happened years ago. It's when we lived in Olean on Carolina Street. And it was a nice day, so I went out for a bike ride and turned left on Carolina Street, wide into Virginia Street, turned left on Ohio Street, and I was just about to turn right on York Street when right in the middle of the road was a garage door opener. And so I stopped and I thought, well, I should try and find out who this is and get back to them. Now, how do you find out whose garage door opener it is? So I started pushing it to see whose door opened. So I got back on my bike and went around pushing it, see whose door opened. I went all over the neighborhood. No luck, nobody's door opened. But I noticed that on the thing, there's an indicator light. It was supposed to be a red indicator light, and it wasn't coming on. So I thought, well, maybe the thing got damaged when it fell on the road. So I went home to see if I could fix it. I went in the living room, sat down in my chair, and got a screwdriver and took the thing apart. And you know, there's a little circuit board inside of it. And I noticed that if you pushed on the circuit board a certain way and then pushed the button, that red light would come on. So I kept playing with that, and I found that there was a piece of solder that had a crack in it, and that was the problem. So I thought, well, I can fix that. So I went and got my soldering gun and put a drop of solder on it, let it cool for a second, pushed it, worked fine. Pushed it a few more times, worked fine. So I put it back together, put the screw back in, tried a few more times, still worked. Now, well, now, time for another bike ride. So I got up from my chair, and just as I got up from the chair, I took a double take out the front window. And right across the road, there's my neighbor Brian, standing in his driveway, looking at his garage door. And I'm thinking, huh. So I push it. That's Brian's. Turned out he didn't realize but when his wife Paula went to run some errands, she'd left it on the car and slid off. But all he knew is the door was going up and down. So. Anyway, let's talk about dating dinosaurs. Now, have any of you ever dated a dinosaur? You know, I always ask that question. One time, a lady raised her hand and said, I've dated a dinosaur. And then she pointed to her husband. Of course, it's just a play on words, but I will be talking about the dating of dinosaurs. Now, people are fascinated by dinosaurs. It's always the busiest place in the Science Museum. Now, this is a picture I took at the Science Museum at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Busiest room in the Science Museum. And this is a picture I took at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, in Manhattan. And again, the busiest room in the museum. People are fascinated by dinosaurs. And evolution scientists have taken advantage of that fascination we have with dinosaurs by using dinosaurs to promote the theory of evolution. And of course, evolution contradicts the Bible. So in effect, what they're doing is they're using dinosaurs to discredit the Word of God. And as I said earlier this morning, I find that very ironic because once you know the facts about dinosaurs become a huge embarrassment to evolution. And you'll see that as we go on this evening. Now, the question I want to address right now is this. How long have dinosaurs been extinct? Well, let me start by saying I don't know how long dinosaurs have been extinct. As far as I'm concerned, there is no scientific way to determine how long dinosaurs have been extinct. And to say otherwise is illogical. However, evolution scientists, they claim to know how long dinosaurs have been extinct. I have printouts from 6 different encyclopedias here. And in each one I've highlighted in yellow where the evolution scientist who authored the article claims to know how long dinosaurs have been extinct. And in every case but one, they say that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years. That's a long time. The only encyclopedia I found was different was Britannica. And of course, Britannica has always been the most prestigious encyclopedia in the world. And perhaps for that reason, Britannica has it narrowed down a little better. According to Britannica Encyclopedia, dinosaurs have been extinct for 66.4 million years. Now, evolution scientists really seem to know how long dinosaurs have been extinct. And here's another museum. This is the Buffalo Museum of Science. Years ago, Sandy and I took our 3 boys, they were young boys at the time, brought them to the Buffalo Museum of Science one day to learn some science. And at the time, there was a huge dinosaur exhibit at the museum. It wasn't their own exhibit. It was one of those exhibits that travels from museum to museum to museum. And for a few months, it was stationed at the Buffalo Museum. It was a huge exhibit. And like usual in those in those museums, they had facts posted about dinosaurs. And I took a photograph of one of those facts. Let me show it to you. They say it's a fact that the first human-like creature lived 62 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs. And I have to realize that according to evolution scientists, the first human-like creature evolved into existence about 3 million years ago. And they say that dinosaurs went extinct 62 million years before that. So if you do the arithmetic, they're saying it's a fact that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years. A fact. Now, in science, when you say something is a fact, that means you have proven it to be true. You know for a fact it's true. Not, you haven't proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. You've proven it beyond any doubt. In science, you hear them say, facts do not change. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be in science, because you've proven it to be true. So they cannot change if they're truly a fact. And so they say it's a fact that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years. Now, if you ask one of those evolution scientists who make this claim, that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years, if you ask them, how do they know? How have they proven that to be true? What do you think they'd say? Well, they'd say something like, we date the fossils. Actually, they can't date the fossils directly. Fossils do not date well. And they can't even date the rock they find the fossils in, the sedimentary rock. They can only date volcanic rock. And so they find a layer of volcanic rock and then correlate it up or down to the layer of sedimentary rock they find the dinosaur fossil, and then they say that's how long it's been extinct. Very, very exact method they have there. And so even though they can't date the dinosaurs' fossils, they date them indirectly. The way they actually do it is they dig up all the fossils they can find of dinosaurs, and they have dug up tons of fossils of dinosaurs. And then using their dating methods, they indirectly date each and every dinosaur fossil they ever dug up. Then they simply look at all the dates of all the dinosaur fossils they ever dug up to see which one dates the most recent. In this case, 65 million years. So they say, aha, dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years. That method, by the way, is the same method they use for any extinct organism. See, it's not just dinosaurs that are extinct today. There are many plants and animals that are believed to be extinct today. And evolution scientists have calculated, in each case, they've calculated how long that plant or animal has been extinct. And in every single case, they use the same exact method they use with the dinosaurs. They dig up the fossils, date them, and see which date's the most recent. Now, you might be wondering, could they be off a little bit? Could they be off 5%? Could they be off 25%, and maybe they've only been extinct 49 million years? What I'm getting at is, what is the margin of error for dinosaur extinctions? Now, a margin of error, let me explain what margin of error is. A margin of error of 10% does not mean you're off 10%. It means you could be off as much as 10%. You might be right on. You're just admitting that you don't know for sure. You're admitting that you could be off as much as 10%. When's the last time you heard evolution scientists give the margin of error for dinosaur extinctions? You know, Gallup poll, they admit to having a margin of error. You know, during election season, you might read about a Gallup poll that says, well, this candidate for office is supported by 58% of the population within a 9% margin of error. Gallup poll admits they have a margin of error. They admit it. They publish it. But when's the last time you saw in a museum that it's a fact dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years within a 10% margin of error? You never see that. Instead, you see like the picture I showed you. It's a fact that dinosaurs have been extinct for that long. So, since evolution scientists do not admit to having a margin of error in their calculations, I thought that this evening we'd calculate the margin of error for them. It's not hard to do, as you will see. So we're going to do it, and we're going to go about it very logically and very scientifically. So when we get done this evening, we'll be able to say that dinosaurs have been extinct for X number of years within a X% margin of error. What we'll do then is first we'll start with the facts. The real facts, not the evolutionary pretend facts, the real facts. And it's a fact that all extinction dates are determined the same way. No matter what plant or animal it is, evolution scientists use the exact same method they used with the dinosaurs to determine how long they've been extinct. And it's also a fact that some of their extinction dates they've come up with have had to be revised. Now, what's that tell you right away? it tells you there is a margin for error. Because if they've had to revise some of their extinction dates, which they found the same way as dinosaurs, then it only stands to reason it's possible they may have to someday revise the dinosaur extinction dates. So, this is what we'll do then. We're going to look at the percent error that evolution scientists have made with some of their other extinction dates, which they found the same way, and apply that percent as the minimum margin of error for dinosaur extinctions. It's a very logical and very scientific way to go about it. So that's what we're going to do. So let's do that. Let's start by looking at a couple other extinct plants or animals that evolution scientists have assigned extinction dates to using the same method and see how much they've been off. Let's start with the coelacanth fish. For generations of students, evolution scientists taught that the coelacanth fish had been extinct for 65 million years. Now, how did evolution scientists know that the coelacanth fish had been extinct for 65 million years? The same way. The only way they ever know how long anything's been extinct. They dug up all the fossils they could find of the coelacanth fish, and they dug up tons of fossils of coelacanth fish, so much so they used that as an index fossil, because that's how plentiful they were. And then using their dating methods, they indirectly dated each and every coelacanth fossil they ever dug up. And then they simply looked at all the dates of all the coelacanth fossils they ever dug up to see which one was the most recent. In this case, 65 million years. Same as the dinosaurs. Found in the exact same way. Well, that was all well and good until a fisherman caught a live coelacanth off the coast of Madagascar. And since then, they've caught hundreds of them. It turns out that the people native to Madagascar said this fish, of course they had a different name for it, but they said this fish has been part of our diet forever. Think about this. For generations, evolution scientists were teaching that the coelacanth fish had been extinct for 65 million years, when the whole time they were teaching it, people were eating it for supper. Now, here's a photograph of a live coelacanth fish taken with an underwater camera. Not doing too badly for being extinct 65 million years. Ladies and gentlemen, the coelacanth fish never was extinct, which means that with this fish, using their dating methods to calculate extinctions, they made a 65 million year mistake. That is a huge mistake, even for evolution scientists. And I want to point out something. The fossil record has not changed. They have not found any more recent fossils of the coelacanth fish. According to the evolutionary interpretation of the fossil record, coelacanth fish are still extinct 65 million years. The only reason they quit teaching it is because they found them alive. If they had not found these fish alive yet, they would still be teaching that they've been extinct for 65 million years. To put it another way, let's say the coelacanth fish really were extinct today, but let's say they were extinct 100 years ago. Well, there'd be none to find alive. That means that evolution scientists would continue to teach and continue to teach and continue to teach that they've been extinct for 65 million years. They'd be wrong by almost 65 million years, but no one could prove otherwise. No one would be the wiser. Makes you wonder about some of their other extinction dates. Let's take a look at another extinct organism. This one's a plant, the WOLLEMI pine tree. For generations of students, evolution scientists taught that the WOLLEMI pine tree had been extinct for 150 million years, more than twice as long as the dinosaurs. And how did they know that WOLLEMI pine trees had been extinct for 150 million years? Same way. The only way they ever know how long anything's been extinct. They dug up all the fossils they could find of the WOLLEMI pine tree, and then using their dating methods, they indirectly dated each and every fossil they ever dug up. And then they simply looked at all the dates of all the WOLLEMI fossils they ever dug up to see which one was most recent. In this case, 150 million years, more than twice as old as dinosaurs, found in the exact same way. Well, I've got another photograph to show you. This is a live WOLLEMI pine tree. Actually, there's several in this picture. And let me assure you of something. You're just going to have to take my word for this. But let me assure you that this photograph was not taken 150 million years ago. Which means that with a WOLLEMI pine tree, evolution scientists made a 150 million year mistake. That is huge. And again, the fossil record has not changed. If they hadn't found these yet, they'd still be teaching them to be extinct 150 million years. Or if they'd gone extinct 100 years ago, there would be none to find alive. So evolution scientists would continue to teach and continue to teach and continue to teach they'd been extinct for 150 million years. They'd be wrong by almost 150 million years, but no one would be the wiser. Here's an article from the Buffalo newspaper printed shortly after these trees were found in 1994, written by an evolutionist. Venturing into an isolated grove in a rainforest reserve 125 miles from Sydney, the Parks and Wildlife Service officer suddenly found himself standing amid trees thought to have disappeared 150 million years ago. The discovery is the equivalent of finding a small dinosaur still alive on the earth. I find that last sentence interesting. The discovery is the equivalent of finding a small dinosaur still alive. Now, by small dinosaur, they don't mean a baby dinosaur. They mean a small species dinosaur. Some species of dinosaurs, full grown, only got to be the size of chickens. Obviously, if a giant sauropod was trampling around the earth, we couldn't miss it. But how about a dinosaur the size of a chicken where they lived back deep in the jungle someplace? We could conceivably miss that. And so that's what this evolution scientist is saying, that from an evolutionary standpoint, finding these trees, which we actually did find, is no more surprising to an evolutionist than it would be to find a small dinosaur still alive. But wait a minute. I thought they knew for a fact that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years. Oh, they do. But they also knew for a fact that these trees have been extinct for 150 million years. I think they need to do a fact check. What do you think? What percent error did evolution scientists make with coelacanths and WOLLEMI pine trees? 100%. Okay then. What percent is the margin of error for dinosaurs? 100%. 150 million years is 100% of 150 million years. The point is, evolution scientists have no idea how long dinosaurs have been extinct, so they should stop claiming to know, because every time they make that claim, they're showing a severe lack of logic and some very bad science. Oh, and remember this picture I took at the Buffalo Museum of Science, that it's a fact that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years? That's not a fact, because they can't prove that true. So let's fix their fact for them. We'll do them a little favor here. If they want to put a fact up in these dinosaur exhibits, how about this for a fact? How about it's a fact that dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years within a 100% margin of error? Now that's a fact. It doesn't tell you anything, but at least you can prove that true. So technically it is a fact. So if you ever see this sign go up in the museums, you'll know that was my idea. Let's talk about radiometric dating. Radiometric dating are those methods where they come up with all these millions and millions of years that you hear about. And there's several of these dating methods, long-age dating methods. There's potassium-argon dating, where potassium decays into argon gas, and rubidium-strontium dating, uranium-lead dating. There's just a whole host of these. And they all work basically the same way and make a lot of the same assumptions. Now, the question I want to address is, are these dating methods accurate? Can you rely on them to be accurate? Because, you know, as you've seen, evolution scientists place a tremendous amount of faith in these dating methods. Is that faith well-founded? Well, let's take a look. First question I want to address is this. Have these long-age dating methods, the ones that give the millions of years, have they ever been correct a single time? You know, the proper scientific answer to this question is, we don't know. How could we know? How can we test them? How can you calibrate them? How do we know? What do we have that we know is for a fact to be 100 million years old that we can test these with, so we know if we're getting anywhere near the right results? These don't work on short ages. They say they don't work on short ages. They don't work on the millions of years. Great. Well, how do we know they're working on the millions of years? Just trust us on that. Well, you know, I'm a petroleum engineer, and over the years, there's a lot of times where I've measured the pressure on gas wells. Some low-pressure wells, you know, maybe under 25 pounds per square inch. Some high-pressure wells, well over 1,000 pounds per square inch. When I measure the pressure on a well, I don't put any faith in my results unless the pressure gauge I'm using has been calibrated in the range in which I'm using it. If it's only been calibrated in ranges over 1,000 pounds, I certainly wouldn't use it on a well that only has, you know, 15 or 20 pounds per square inch. And any engineer knows this. Any engineer knows that any measuring device or any method you use to measure something, you can only put as much faith in it as what it's been tested at. how it's been calibrated. So, how have evolution scientists calibrated their long-age dating methods? What do we know for a fact to be 100 million years old that we can test these with so we know if we're getting anywhere near the right results? Do any of you collect old coins? Do any of you have a coin that has a mint date on it, 100 million years BC? Well, if you do, throw it away. It's a fraud. The point is, there is no way to test these long-age dating methods. So there is no way to know if they've ever been correct. Okay, then, another question. Have long-age dating methods ever been wrong? Oh, yeah, several times. Let me give you an example. Here's a drill core. Now, I went over drill cores before. That's when you take a special bit and you cut a cylinder of rock down deep in the earth so you can get a sample of rock down in the earth. This is one from a project I worked on one time. This is a core of a tar sand from a project I worked on in Kentucky when I worked for Marathon Oil Company. You can still smell the oil in it. And that's a cylinder rock, just like this is cylinder rock. Now, in this case, this was dug in Australia. In this case, the rock is basalt, where this one was limestone, this is tar sand, but this is basalt. And basalt is a volcanic rock. And remember, volcanic rock, that's the type of rock they can date using these long-age dating methods. But embedded right in the rock were pieces of wood. Not fossils of wood, actual pieces of wood. Obviously, at some time in the past, we don't know when, but at some time in the past, a volcano went off or some kind of lava flow and covered up some wood. Now, the wood was either alive or recently dead when it got covered up, because wood can't stand around long before it rots away. Which means that we can tell that the wood and the rock are approximately the same age. Because when you date wood, you actually are dating how long has it been dead. And when you date volcanic rock, what you're actually dating is how long since it hardened into rock. So that's one thing we know, is they're approximately the same age. We don't know how old they are, but we know they're approximately the same age. And there is no dating method that will work on both wood and rock. I wish there was, but there's not. However, wood can be dated using carbon dating because wood used to be alive. That's the only thing carbon dating will work on, something that used to be alive. But the basalt, it can't be dated by carbon dating, but it can be dated by potassium argon dating because it's a volcanic rock. So what they did is they had 3 different secular laboratories date both the wood and the rock. Now, there aren't that many laboratories that do this, so these are the same laboratories that you see quoting all these millions of years in the newspapers, the textbooks, and the museums, and so forth. One thing we know is that wood and rock are approximately the same age. And here's the results that they came up with. The 3 secular laboratories, they were scattered, but on average, the wood dated to be about 40,000 years old using carbon dating, but the rock dated to be roughly 40 million years old using potassium argon dating. Now that's a problem, you see, because what's the one thing we know? We know they're approximately the same age. Well, 40,000 and 40 million are not approximately the same age. In fact, I did the calculation to see what % difference there is between these 2 dates. And it turns out there's a 99.9% difference between these 2 dates. And yet we know the % difference in actuality is close to 0. But yet 99.9% different. Which proves what? It proves that one or both of these dating methods was terribly wrong in this case. I think they're both way off, but scientifically all I can say is at least one of these dating methods was terribly wrong in this case. Now, if you want to read more about this case, see the colored pictures and some of the background on it and so forth, pick up one of my brochures here. It's got my, among other things, it has my email address, and just send me an email and say, Chris, please send me the link to the dating, and I'll know what you mean. In fact, I'll send you a link to some others. This has been done several times where they found wood embedded in rock. They dated both the wood and rock. They came out totally different. So, therefore, to sum this up, it's a fact that there has never been a case in which long-age dating methods were proven to be correct. For the simple reason there's no way to calibrate them. And it's also a fact that there have been several cases in which long-age dating methods are proven to be wrong. Which brings us to this question. Why do evolution scientists place so much faith in radiometric dating when they've never been proven correct a single time, but they have been proven wrong several times? Why would any scientist put faith in something like that? Well, I'm going to let an atheist answer this question. Richard Milton, he's an atheist. In fact, early in his book he says, he quote, "I have no religious beliefs of any kind." So he's trying to tell us he's an atheist. But yet, he's an evolutionist. All atheists are evolutionists because to be a creationist, you've got to believe in a creator. Well, an atheist doesn't believe in a creationist. So all atheists are evolutionists. But yet he wrote this book called Shattering the Myths of Darwinism. So even though Richard Milton's an evolutionist, he's not our Darwinian evolutionist. See, there's a little bit of a debate among some of the evolutionists about the speed of evolution. The Darwinian evolutionists, they say it took at least 1 billion years for bacteria to evolve all the way to people. But other evolutionists, such as Richard Milton, says, no, it only took millions of years for bacteria to evolve all the way to people. Millions of years versus billions of years, it may not make much difference to you, but to evolutionists, it's a huge difference. So again, there's a little bit of a debate among them. And Richard Milton wrote this book called Shattering the Myths of Darwinism to poke fun, basically, at the long-age evolutionists. He says, in the introduction, he says, "I present evidence that currently accepted methods of dating are seriously flawed and are supported by Darwinists only because they provide the billions of years required by Darwinist theories." So, why do evolution scientists put so much faith in these long-age dating methods? Well, according to this atheist, only because they provide the billions of years required by Darwinist theories. Now, there's an honest atheist, sort of. Now, back to our original question. How long have dinosaurs been extinct? I don't know. Remember, the proper scientific answer to this question is we don't know, because there's no scientific way to determine it. It's only the evolution scientists that claim to have a scientific way to determine how long dinosaurs have been extinct. And they've proven themselves that their method can be off by at least 150 million years. And so every time they make that claim that they know, they're showing bad logic and bad science. Okay, next question. How long have we known about dinosaurs? Well, according to evolution scientists, not very long. According to evolution scientists, there's no way we could have known what dinosaurs looked like until the 1800s. Beginning in the 1820s, they started to very carefully dig up dinosaur bones, which tend to be scattered all over in bits and pieces, and they have to put them together and fill in the blanks. And in fact, it wasn't until 1841 that the term dinosaur was even invented. So if people did know what dinosaurs were before the 1800s, they would have had to call them something else, because they couldn't call them dinosaur because that word wasn't even in the dictionary yet. But you know, it's not that easy to put. You know, when you go to the museums, you see these dinosaurs all put together, and they look really cool and everything. But there's an awful lot that goes in, and they've made mistakes, by the way. Some of you might remember the Brontosaurus. Well, it turns out there was no such thing as a Brontosaurus. They put some of the bones together wrong, and it was actually a combination of different dinosaurs, so that was a big mistake. But it's not that easy. You know, they find these bones scattered, and using modern technology, they reconstruct what these things looked like. And so evolution scientists say there is no way that people could have known what dinosaurs looked like until the 1800s. Okay. What's this? It's a brass plate, and there's some pictures on here. What are these? Ask any child, they'll tell you. Dinosaurs! Okay, when was this picture made? 1496. Hundreds of years before we could have known what dinosaurs looked like. How do we know it was made in 1496? Because this brass plate surrounds this tomb. This is the brass plate I'll show you the picture of. This is a tomb of Bishop Richard Bell. He's buried in the floor of Carlisle Cathedral in England. Bishop Richard Bell died in 1496, and people have been walking over his tomb ever since. In recent years, they start keeping this covered with carpet most of the time because it's wearing it down from all the traffic. And this brass plate that surrounds it has pictures of a whole bunch of different animals and birds, all easily recognizable. And this, dinosaurs. Now, how did they know what dinosaurs looked like in 1496? Well, I'll tell you, personally, I don't think they saw these dinosaurs in 1496. What I think is more likely is that ancient people, thousands of years ago, saw dinosaurs and passed on pictures and stories, descriptions of dinosaurs, and I think that's how they knew what they looked like. And as a matter of fact, they have found pictures of dinosaurs on cave walls, supposedly made by cavemen. And they have found dinosaurs in ancient architecture, ancient pottery, and they have descriptions of dinosaurs being passed down from virtually all ancient cultures, especially China, but not just China, but all ancient cultures seem to have these descriptions of these large reptilian creatures, and some of these descriptions sound like certain species of dinosaurs. They couldn't call them dinosaurs, they usually called them dragons, and sometimes they embellished them with fire. But you take out the fire and they look, and the description sounds like certain species of dinosaurs. Now, how did they know what dinosaurs looked like unless they saw them? Well, what do evolution scientists say about this? Well, mostly they ignore this historical evidence because it does not fit their scientific theories. But let me show you an exception. Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was one of the most famous evolution scientists who ever lived. He was a highly respected, highly intelligent scientist. And he was once voted the smartest man in America by the readers of Parade magazine. And he once hosted a TV series on evolution called Cosmos. And he wrote several books on evolution, including this book, Dragons of Eden. And for this book, by the way, he won a Pulitzer Prize. And what this book is all about is he comes up with a theory on how ancient people knew about dinosaurs. It kind of goes like this. He says, there's just too much evidence. The amount of evidence that ancient people knew about dinosaurs is overwhelming. He says, folks, we've got to come up with an evolutionary explanation for all this evidence that ancient people knew about dinosaurs. But he says, we know that dinosaurs went extinct for millions of years before people ever evolved into existence. But, he says, our ancestors knew about dinosaurs because dinosaurs used to eat our ancestors. Now, who are our ancestors, according to evolution, that were alive 65 million years ago? This is long before apes and monkeys. This is back when your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were little mouse-like creatures, like tree shrews they often point to. Okay, now which ones of those mouse-like creatures survived so they could eventually evolve into you? Well, the ones that were most fit to survive. And which ones were most fit to survive? Well, Sagan says it's the ones that developed an instinct in their brains through thousands of mutations on what dinosaurs looked like so they could run and hide when dinosaurs were around. That gave them an advantage over other mouse-like creatures, so they could survive and eventually evolve into us. Now, he says, well, since those mouse-like creatures evolved into people, that means their mouse brains evolved into our brains. And he says, therefore, perhaps embedded deep in our subconscious are these images of dinosaurs that we've inherited from those mouse brains. He even says that maybe the reason young children have nightmares about monsters, for anyone who ever teaches about monsters, could be because it's their subconscious coming out of these leftover vestiges, leftover images of dinosaurs that they've inherited from Grandpa Mouse back a long, long time ago. And he says, well, maybe that's how ancient people were able to draw pictures of dinosaurs and give descriptions of dinosaurs, because it's their subconscious coming out in the dreams, and they just express what they saw in their dreams. Now, I didn't do all this to make fun of Carl Sagan, but I'm pointing out that the evidence that this smartest man in America, a highly respected, highly intelligent evolution scientist, felt that the evidence that ancient people knew about dinosaurs is so overwhelming that he had to come up with this wild theory to try to explain it in an evolutionary way. So, how did ancient people know about dinosaurs? Well, there's a couple theories out there. One is because we inherited images of them from mouse brains. I personally favor the other theory, that ancient people saw them and passed them on, but hey, take your pick, you know. Okay, what was Behemoth? In Job chapter 40, beginning in verse 15, you read about this creature, this animal called Behemoth. Let me give you a little background to it. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but in Job, the book of Job, we learn that Job, he fell on some really tough times. And because of that, he was getting pretty upset with God. He got really uppity with God, and God listened to him as he spouted and so on. Finally, God spoke. When God spoke, Job listened. And God told Job, he says, "Who do you think you are?" And he started to impress Job on the things that he'd done, the things that he'd created, things that he could do that Job couldn't do. He said, "Who do you think you are?" And one of the things that God mentioned to impress Job with was about Behemoth. Well, first of all, that tells us the Behemoth was a real animal. Because it wouldn't have been very impressive for God to tell Job about some animal that he never created. It was just a myth. So we know that Behemoth was a real animal. So let me read the description of Behemoth. This is God speaking to Job. "Job, look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins. What power in the muscles of his belly. His tail sweeps like a cedar." He ranks first among the works of God. Now, I want to start by saying that I think God was describing a dinosaur, one of those giant sauropods, the biggest and most powerful dinosaurs. Can't prove it, but that's what I think he was describing. And I'll explain why. Let me go over this line by line so I can show you why I think God was referring to a giant sauropod dinosaur. Okay, God says he made Behemoth along with you. Now, we know from page 1 of the Bible that all animals were made on day 6. Behemoth was an animal. So we know that Behemoth was made on day 6. You know what else we know from page 1? Man was made on day 6. So not only did God make Behemoth and man, God made Behemoth and man on the same day of creation, day 6. So that fits. He ranks first among the works of God. What is the biggest and most powerful animal that God ever made, as far as we know? Well, it certainly wasn't the chipmunk. As far as we know, the biggest and most powerful animal that God ever made, by far, were the giant sauropod dinosaurs. Nothing was their equal. They dwarfed T-Rex. If they swatted T-Rex with its tail, T-Rex would end up in the next county. These things were huge. They went over 100 tons when they were full grown. So that fits. Feeds on grass like an ox. Oh boy, this one's interesting. Now, many of you have probably seen the original Jurassic Park movie. And early on in the movie, where the star of the show, the scientist, was brought over to Jurassic Park, they were brought over to the island on a helicopter, and then they put him in a Jeep, and they were on their way to the compound for the first time. And the scientist had never seen a live dinosaur. And what's the first dinosaur he saw? These giant sauropods with their necks, huge tails, long necks. The necks are stretched way up in the trees, picking leaves off the tops of the tallest of trees and eating them. Well, if they made Jurassic Park today, they probably wouldn't show it that way, because evolution scientists have changed their minds about the sauropods. They now say they don't think they would have raised their heads way up in the air like that, because they say there's no way they could have pumped the blood up that far up to the brain. So if they did raise their heads up that far, they'd faint and fall over. So evolution scientists have changed their mind. Now they think that the giant sauropods kept their necks out, and then to eat, they ate from the ground. They're grazers. In other words, they ate grass like an ox. Evolution scientists today believe that the biggest and most powerful animals that ever roamed this planet ate grass like an ox. So that fits. What strength he has in his loins. There is no animal that we know of that had anywhere near the strength in his loins as did the giant sauropods. What power in the muscles of his belly. Same thing. His tail sways like a cedar. Cedar trees get pretty big. Think about, what animal do we know of that we could describe as having a tail like a tree, swinging like a tree? Only one I know of are the giant sauropods. Their tails were huge. One swath of its tail could wipe out this whole room. They were massive tails. So you see why I think that God was describing a giant sauropod dinosaur. But not everyone thinks that. Here's two study Bibles. Now, first of all, this is not meant as an endorsement for one or the other of these. I use both these study Bibles, and I learn from both of them. But I want to point out something. The study Bible has two parts. There's Scripture, which is inspired by God, and then there's study notes, which are not inspired by God. So we have to be careful. We have to treat those two parts of the study Bible differently. Now, in the New American Standard Study Bible, when it gets to the book of Job, it says that the behemoth was probably a dinosaur. And I would agree with that. I think it was one of the sauropod dinosaurs, the biggest of all the dinosaurs. But the NIV Study Bible says, no, behemoth was probably a hippopotamus or an elephant. Now, quite a difference. Dinosaur, hippo, or elephant. Let's see how these stack up. There's this giant sauropod with a huge tail. Here's an elephant and a hippo. Now, which one of these would best be described as the biggest and most powerful animal that God ever made? Because we know He made all three of these. The hippo and elephant better hope he doesn't swing his tail. They're going to end up on the other side of the lake. Oh, and speaking of tail, which one of these critters would you say you describe as having a tail like a tree? Ever see a tail on a hippopotamus? Elephant's not much better. Why would anyone, knowing that God created all these, why would anyone suggest that the behemoth was a hippo or an elephant instead of a giant sauropod? Well, I can tell you why. It's because we've been evolutionized in our thinking. Ever since we were young children, we've been taught that dinosaurs went extinct millions of years before people ever roamed this earth, before people evolved into existence. And so Job couldn't have known what a sauropod was. See how we've been evolutionized in our thinking? Even to the point where it has gotten into our study Bibles. And that's not a good thing.